Hello and welcome to the Wild Winter Women YouTube channel. I'm Leah and I'm back with Faye, and we're here tonight to talk about the Iditarod Trail Invitational, which is still taking place right now in Alaska. It started over 3 weeks ago. It's been a long time. They've been on the trail a long time. We've been talking about this race for a long time. But it still is really cool. Lots of fun stuff is happening and has happened since Faye and I talked last. Tonight's currently the evening of Tuesday, March 10th. So in the race, all of the bikers have now finished in the 1,000-mile race. They've all reached Nome. And in that field, there were two women, Julie Perilla Garcia and Janice Tower. And I'm going to take a minute just to talk about each of them. Julie is back in the ITI for the fourth time this year. She completed the 350-mile race in both 2015 and 2016, and then returned 2 years ago in 2023 for her first bid to Nome. She had a knee injury early on. I spent a lot of time with her on the trail, but unfortunately her race ended in the ghost town of Iditarod. There was a checkpoint there and she was able to get a ride out. And then last year she went up during the race and she volunteered in McGrath at the end of the 350-mile race and took really good care of all of the racers who came in there, whether their race only was the 350 and ended at McGrath or whether they were passing on. She made sure that we were well fed and had a great place to sleep and got everything that we need. And then she came back this year armed with strong knees and a fur ruff, which she had wanted 2 years ago when it was very cold. And when she's not competing in cold weather races, she's a self-proclaimed nerd, aka a software engineer that taught herself to code when she was 6 years old. She used to live in Alaska and now she lives in Colorado, I believe. And Janice Tower also completed the race on bike. She is possibly the most decorated in this year's race. She's been at this for over 2 decades. Her first time in the ITI was in 2002. When they were just on mountain bikes, because it was well before fat bikes were on the scene. Prior to this year, she started in the ITI 356 times and finished 4 of those times. In addition to that, she's completed the Susitna 100 11 times, White Mountains 100 4 or 5 times, and the Arrowhead 135 once. And I met her when she was in Minnesota for the Arrowhead 135 in, I think, 2010. I was volunteering there, not in the race yet. Her motto is to dream big and dare to fail, which is attributed to Norman Vaughn. Norman was an Alaskan. He was involved in a lot of different things: polar exploration, mountaineering, and the Iditarod. He raced in the Iditarod dog sled race many times, for the last time at the age of 84, which I don't know. I've never met an 84-year-old who I could imagine being on the trail. That's so impressive. So Janice considers going over the Alaska Range to be the best feeling in the world, and this year she wanted to see what lied beyond McGrath. She recently became a grandmother, is 63 years old, and raced with her brother Matt, who's 66. Janice and Matt have raced together to McGrath before, and she found it to be a joy to be with him, and they'd wanted to go all the way to Nome together and then go fishing this spring. Matt has a boat and does a lot of fishing. So I just want to say thanks to Janice for being an inspiration. And I do plan to have her on the YouTube podcast in the next week or 2. So excited for that.
Nice.
Go ahead.
All right. So I can talk about the 4 racers that are still on the course. So we have 3 on foot and 1 skier. And they are by no means behind. They are just on time for average finishes for on foot and ski. And so they just are just kind of plugging along, and we don't hear very much from them, which honestly kind of means that things are probably going pretty smoothly. So John Rickner is on foot and Eric Bassett is on skis. And where the last time we updated, I think they had maybe like John had left his headlamp in Caltag and Eric brought it to Unalakleet for him. And since then they've kind of paired up together. They were a little bit apart. Eric needed some more rest when he got to Unalakleet. And then they left Shack Tulik. John left Shack Tulik. He stopped in Little Mountain Cabin and he rested for about 5 hours and Eric caught up to him. So they crossed Norton Sound together and they left Koyuk for after a short rest yesterday, and they went to Quick River Cabin where they spent the night last night. And then today they went more or less together to Elam. And so we'll see if they stick together the rest of the race. It's really nice to have company out there. And, even if you're maybe not within the same like mile during the day, at least, there's someone there at night and stuff. And it can be comforting to have someone to share the experience with. So they're resting in Elam tonight, and then they'll go either to Golovin or White Mountain tomorrow. And so they're getting there. And
one of the nice things too, which Faye wrote about tonight in the written summary over at ITI Alaska, is that on the coast there are some great schools to stay in. And so, many of these towns, Shack Tulik, Koyuk, Elam, Golovin, the schools are very generous, take people in, and you can stay there, sometimes get a shower, use the bathrooms, hot water. A great place to be. Yeah. Drop boxes, like you can send your box ahead of time through the U.S. Postal Service to the school, and then they'll hang on to it for you. So.
Yeah. The schools are great. And let's see. So then we've got 2 other people on foot, Peter and Kari. And today they went, well, maybe I should back up a little bit. They've been traveling together since Caltag, pretty much. And after they went from Caltag to Old Woman Cabin, where they had what I would say is the experience of a lifetime at Old Woman Cabin. So Kari had messaged that they got to the cabin and there was kind of like a crew of people there, and they were waiting on these Norwegian mushers and their dog team. So there's 2 dog teams with Norwegian mushers who were out there just touring the course. And so they got in there and the people were so generous. So they fed them a warm meal, gave them Norwegian chocolate, gave them alcohol, and then said, we're going to take the cabin, but you can have our Arctic oven tent tonight that you can sleep in. So it's a warm tent that has a little stove in it. And she reported they slept on caribou hides. And they were kind of getting ready for bed, and the mushers were coming in, and she has this video of it where there's flares put out to like welcome the mushers there for the night, and it's kind of a big production with people cheering and everything. And Kari's like giggling, it's making her so happy. So just this like super great experience at Old Woman Cabin, which is always nice to hear. So after they were treated like royalty, they went on to Unalakleet, got pizza, made their way through the Blueberry Hills up to Shack Tulik, and this is Kari's favorite part of the trail so far. She had just this beautiful view. So when you're in the Blueberry Hills, you can see, as long as it's a nice weather day, you can see way out onto the ocean. There's a big island out there. And yeah, it's just so beautiful. The hills can be a little challenging, but it sounds like they were able to sled down them, which is the benefit of being able to ride your sled. So when you go up, then you come back down. And when you get down out of the Blueberry Hills, you get whatever wind Shaktoolik has is like coming at you, and then they experience that for, I think it's like 12 miles from when you get to the bottom, I think, into Shaktoolik. So yeah, they had that headwind, spent some time in Shaktoolik, moved on to the little mountain cabin last night, and then today they made their way to Koyuk. The wind has kind of been the story, like the wind across Norton Bay, I feel like has been the story the whole race. Our first 7 racers experienced it, and Blown In Trail, and then all the mushers experienced it, our other racers experienced it. So it just has been like, I feel like the same exact thing, like day after day. It may vary a little bit. I think some people have been able to cross, like John and Eric crossed overnight, and I feel like they avoided the worst of it. But from the little mountain cabin, they were last night that they stayed in, they said that the wind was just battering the cabin all night, and then it let up around 3 a.m. And then they went out to cross the ice. They're into a headwind. Peter said tonight that it was his hardest crossing. He feels like, just with that wind blowing in your face all day long, can really wear on you.
And I think too, like, I feel like it's changed a little bit. Like with the lead racers, it was a little bit windy. I remember seeing like wind speeds of 30 miles an hour, but it wasn't as cold. Whereas now, temperatures have been single digits or down to 10 or 15 below, and a little bit lighter winds, like 10 to 15 miles an hour. So I think before it was more the wind, and then now it's more like the wind chill, just like really cold.
Okay. Yeah. Not the funnest.
But the good news is that they got through it.
And
they're all in Koyuk. And then what's going to happen from here for Kari and Peter is it's going to be a little bit of a tailwind for maybe about a day and a half.
Yeah.
So.
Yep, that's true. John and Eric made good time over to Quick River Cabin, and then from the cabin today to Elam. Those are kind of tailwinds. So that is the good part. I mean, anytime you can like eat without, pull your face covering down without getting blasted, it's like, is a pretty nice change of pace. So, I expect that everyone will rest up overnight and take off tomorrow. And I mean, the weather looks kind of like how it's going to be. I saw maybe it'll warm up a few degrees. So they'll be right around like overnight lows around 0, maybe 5 below, and highs staying in the 5 to 10 range, even for the next couple days up to White Mountain. And so really, I mean, those temps are pretty doable. The trail's not going to get soft and mushy. It hasn't been snowing, so there's not much to blow around and blow in the trail. So fingers crossed, I guess, that the weather pattern holds. And they're just kind of making their way, and they're doing the thing. And I think the last thing about people doing the thing is that so the Iditarod sled dog race is done. And so that officially wrapped up yesterday, Monday. I was like, what day is it? Yeah. And so there were 22 finishers out of 33 starters. The longest Iditarod trail race in history. And so, a lot of stories to tell from the mushers and the experience that they had.
Cool. One other thing that we saw is Gavin Hennigan shared a story, and as listeners may remember, Gavin is the guy who was on foot in the 1,000-mile race. He was in the lead, and then unfortunately he had to drop from the race due to a medical concern. But he won the 1,000-mile race last year. Really strong competitor and great guy. He shared some anecdotes from the bed and breakfast where the racers stay in Galena back on the Yukon River. So he said, so Larry, the guy who owns the bed and breakfast, which is his house, he said he worked 18 hours a day for 9 days straight. So he's resting now too. They traveled to us 50 miles from up the river. It would take over 24 hours to make the trip with a few cat naps and a bivouac sack along the way. The walkers came in much more tired and hungry than the bikers. Because basically people on bike can do that in a day, whereas people on foot oftentimes have to do an overnight, whether they stop and sleep or they push through the night. I cooked 60 all-you-can-eat Grand Slam breakfast and 60 all-you-can-eat dinners, went through 14 dozen eggs. I had to hand carry them through TSA. You should have seen the looks on their faces, because he gets his groceries not in the very small village where he lives, but possibly in Anchorage or Fairbanks or wherever. So he said it was an fun, exhausting 9 days. I met men and women racers from all over the world. Some have come back year after year and are like old friends. So good to be home and resting just like the racers. So thank you to Larry. So
Very nice.
Great. Well, I think that's all that we have for tonight. Later, in the next week, I have some interviews. I mentioned I'm going to be interviewing Janice and then also Julie Perla Garcia and also Leah Wilcox. So excited about those interviews, and then hopefully we can convince Kari to be interviewed once she's off the trail. So
great.
Yeah, just want to say thanks to everyone watching and hope you'll have a good night.